Okay, so welcome everyone, and thank you for attending our panel, Gaining That Coveted Internship. Finding and obtaining internship is an exciting stage in our career path, but also a challenging one because often we don't know where to search or what to look for and how we can really stand out to organizations or individuals who can provide us with that opportunity. And I believe it's a real treat. We have panels of experienced professionals who can provide us with some guidance and wisdom today. So welcome, everyone. Briefly, my name is Sam. My education background is in counseling psychology, and I'm currently working towards my doctorate in clinical psychology. And I've worked in hospitals and clinics and just community agencies. And I think this is an exciting and growing field, and I hope to continue to grow in this field with other professionals like yourself. So I'd like to briefly introduce our panels today. First, we have Dr. Matt Harris, who is a clinical neuropsychologist and also an assistant professor at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hills. And he's also involved in research studies and supervision of students. And next we have Jasmine Kalon. She's a fourth-year graduate student and an intern at Kaiser Permanente Hospital in Oakland. And she gained experience at Kaiser working with adult patients with a variety of disorders using evidence-based techniques like ACT, CBT, DBT, and also she provided therapies in Punjabi language. So welcome. And we have Amy Griffin. She's currently doing her health psychology residency internship at Kaiser Permanente Antioch under a new program called Maternal Infant Resiliency Program. And her focus has been in child psychotherapy, trauma intervention in schools, and she was also a school teacher at one point before entering clinical psychology. And last, we have Julie Nguyen. She's a third-year graduate student who has clinical experiences in various settings like community health, integrated health, and schools. And her passion and experience are in trauma that comes with cultural humility and other issues that come with differences. And she hopes to teach and provide mental health services for diverse and marginalized population in the future. So welcome our panels. And if you would like to know more about our panels, please visit the main TogetherWell website, and we can provide that link for you in the chat. Okay, so let's get going with our questions. I'll ask the panels some questions that will be helpful for a lot of us who might be searching for internship, who just need a refresher on gaining that coveted internship. So, okay, let me pull up the question here. So, Dr. Harris, we want to start off this panel by asking you, as a supervisor of several interns on a yearly basis and a reviewer of applications for internship site. So how much time would you suggest students to allocate for the process of applying to internship?
It's a good question. It's hard to give just one size fits all type of answer because it's going to depend a lot on the person. In general, I think the actual amount of hours you're going to put in writing, 4 essays, cover letters, tweaking them, is not so many hours. It's, 10, 15 hours or whatever. But the amount of stress that goes into it, the amount of soul searching to figure out what you're going to write in your personal statement, the amount of research you should be doing to tailor your cover letters to your specific sites that nobody really does. Take it from me as someone who reads hundreds of them. Second-guessing yourself, revising your cultural essay, revising this, revising that. It's a lot more time than you would think. And, I went to grad school. We put everything off to the last minute. So the actual amount of time, but you should give yourself like a month. Even though it's really, theoretically you could give yourself a few days. You should give yourself like a month to think about it. Actual writing time is going to be far less, but that way you can revise it. You can ask someone to look at your cover letter. You can ask someone to proofread your essays. There's so many errors that I still see in them. And that reduces the stress and reduces the dumb errors. You made it to grad school. You made it through grad school. You know how to write a proper essay with no errors in it. But there's thousands of errors in everything I read because people are so stressed and they're putting it to the last minute, and it's causing, a lot of errors. Stress makes people stupid. So time, maybe like a month is what I would say. And before that month even, you should have a CV anyway. You should have an idea in your head, hopefully, of what types of places you're looking into. Even if you haven't done all the research into the sites yet, what's the type of place you're going to look for, and what's your general strategy going to be. You probably have that before the month, so that you're not reinventing the wheel at the last minute going, I don't know, maybe I want to go to this psychoanalytic place, even though I've never been interested in psychoanalysis and have no experience in it. And you start trying to figure out who you are at the last minute or what's a fit for you. You should hopefully already know that. And when you're not pressed for time, you'll be able to make those decisions much better. So that's my advice for that. Something like a month. Give yourself plenty of time, more than you need.
Okay. I think that's a great big summary of the process. Can you give us a little more, maybe a little more detailed suggestion how students can plan for their success in their internship?
Sure. So as far as planning for the process I kind of talked about, the application process would be doing the soul searching, hopefully ahead of time, and figuring out what's a good fit for you. So I think that's finding out what are my strengths and weaknesses, what is my application going to look like to people, and what do I want out of an internship besides, I just want one, I don't want to have to apply again next year, blah, blah, blah. You got to get that out of your mind because those reaches, you're not going to fit well with those places anyway, and you're probably not going to match with some place that wasn't a good fit for you anyway. You're just like, I need a place. They don't want someone who's like, I just need a place anyway. So again, there's this soul searching aspect of it. And I think that's going to help. Did I cut out internship? I think we're chopping up a little bit. Oh well, hopefully we're back. But yeah, trying to find out what you're looking for in an internship, and what your strengths and weaknesses are so that you feel comfortable. When you get to your internship, you can volunteer for things, but not spread yourself too thin. You can know what kinds of patients or what kinds of projects you're looking for. Always the most useful interns to me are the ones who are comfortable in their own skin and they kind of know what they're good at and what they want to learn in internship, and not the ones who's just like, I will try to please however I can. Then they start, writing weak reports because they certainly weren't ready to, or they had too much on their plate, and they start acting like they can give neuropsych tests that they're not that familiar with, and then they give them in a funky way. And I'm saying, just know yourself, chill out. So my magic wand, I would prescribe all this mindfulness that we were just practicing over this break and tell people to take a breather, figure out who you are, get comfortable, and then less desperate and more, let me see what I can get out of this.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a great point, that you really have to really know yourself for starting anything. So that's a great point, Dr. Harris. I'd like to hear from some other panels. Jasmine, this question is for you. What are your suggestions for navigating through the internship process? Can you give us your...
Yeah, you mean applying and whatnot?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I agree with what Dr. Harris was saying. Like, this is definitely something you kind of have to like lay out a plan and know what you're gonna, how you're gonna approach the essays and how you're gonna approach the cover letters, especially since, depending on how many places you apply to. So, and I feel like I kind of even going back into the summer before applying, being able to see all that. We have I don't know, every school is kind of different. We had a workshop, so we were able to kind of brainstorm ideas and start up cover letters and essays, but really not getting too deep into it. I think it was once the fall came and I was able to kind of, narrow down where I want to be at. I think that's the biggest thing, is like being able to narrow down where you want to be. And like Dr. Harris said, is like places you see yourself, not you're just trying to get to a place, like places that are generally places you're interested in, because that's where the growth is. That's the whole point of internship, is to learn and to like learn in environments where you see yourself in the future. And so I think that's like the biggest thing, is let's narrow down your list. And then once you're able to do that, that's when like the cover letters obviously can, mesh in, which everyone pretty much has been doing cover letters and practicum. So I feel like, yes, it's a different level, but the one thing that's different is the essays. And so that's something that I felt like I was working on through the summer into the fall, and just being able to see like, what is it that I want to present, and how do I want, when people read my application, how I want to represent myself, and being able to really be able to do that in those essays. I think that's the hard part. So I guess overall, what I would say with the process is brainstorming somewhat in the summer, working on those cover letters throughout, but then being able to hone in on what are the places I see myself at, and then getting those, and then those cover letters get pumped up in kind of like a couple weeks or so, and then you're kind of on a road. So I think the biggest thing is creating a plan that works for you. And like mentioned before, like everyone's different. Some people might need that month, some people might need longer, but what has worked for you in the past, and being able to approach it with a game plan.
Okay, great. So I want to get we'd like to hear from our students as well on internship, searching for internship. So I want to ask Julie, how do you manage your school's internship related deadlines, such as confirming your hours or transcripts and et cetera?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So I think for me, just working closely with my training director, and I know that for JFK, they required us to use a program called Time to Track. I'm sure it's familiar to all of you. And I believe now it's required because that's how internship sites look at your hours. So in terms of the exact tips and tools, I actually met with my training director at least twice a month and wrote down the various deadlines and whatnot for transcripts and hours to submit them. And I, of course, use my planner. I'm a very organized person. That has been definitely very helpful for me to follow my deadlines and to figure out what needs to be due for various sites. For example, when are the essays due? When are the CVs due? And when are the cover letters due for each site has been truly helpful. And just being able to collaborate with my cohort as well as my director of clinical training at my school has been helpful to follow their deadlines too.
So it's great that these tools and tips are available for certain programs. And I'm sure we can be creative and create our own if we put our time into it, of course. And I want to ask also, we talked about narrowing our where we want to be in terms of relationship, in terms of internship at some point. How do you, or how did you build your list of internship sites? Where you want to be.
Mhm. Yeah, that was tough. When I was looking at all the sites on APIC, I initially had 40 sites in mind, but I think it's dependent on what our dream site means to the person. For me, it was about geographic location and the population I wanted to work with in the future. And so I think it's important to really ask what are your goals and priorities and finding what your dream site is. So I applied to a lot of hospital sites in California because I have a passion working in healthcare and in integrated health as well. And also, I built my dream site by asking myself, what can be my growing edge? How can I learn and help me grow as a clinician too? And so when I was making my dream list, I was also enjoying working with young adults. And so I also applied to a few college sites too. And I just want to say for those of you who are applying in the future, don't be discouraged if you think that you don't have enough experience. Definitely showcase your passion in working with that particular population in your cover letters and essays as well. So that's kind of how I built my dream site list.
Point. And how about you, Jasmine? How did you build your internship dream site?
So similarly, I kind of first started off with where do I want to be? So geographically, I knew that I was going to stay in the Bay Area. So that kind of narrowed down a lot, or at least in California. So I was looking at, NorCal and SoCal. So that clearly narrows down everything outside, and which was helpful considering how many sites there are out there. And then kind of, APIC has a great little function where we can narrow down by, the type of, sorry, I'm moving the word for it, but the type of, a specialty or just the type of training we want to get. And so I knew that I wanted to be in hospital setting and whatnot. So that helped me narrow it down even more. And then really looking at the possibility of or hospital or primary care, kind of that health psychology setting. So then that kind of narrows down it to, you see Kaisers, you see VAs, you see other private hospitals, and then thinking, okay, where do I see myself with in terms of that? And then also really being realistic. I feel like some of those places that we do have options for do prefer to have I'm a PsyD, and so some prefer just PhD candidates. So being able to narrow those out. And then when I have narrowed it down so much, then really going into each site and seeing, okay, is this something I'm interested in, researching their program a little bit more, or maybe reaching out to people who are at those programs that I might know or know through other people that can give me some input about it and how the experience is. And so with that, it might seem like, oh, there's so many sites, but once you've narrowed it down so much, it kind of does come down to about at least, 10 to 15, I don't know, maybe more or less depending on the person. But I felt like for me, that was a reasonable number. And then, so that's kind of how I approached it personally.
This sounds like quite a process, but maybe something that we all have to kind of go through.
Yeah.
You want to land that. Yeah.
But it really helps when you know where you want to be to. And if you're open to being other places, I mean, more power to you, because then that gives you so many more options, which can be a little bit tricky. But in the end of the day, it's still nice to have all these other options outside of California or wherever one may be living. So, yeah.
Great answer. Thank you. So I want to shift the focus to now, let's say now we are at the process of actually now applying to a site. So Dr. Harris, as a director of training, what do you look for in internship applicants? And what do you suggest students should convey or showcase in their applications?
Good question. So there's a lot of things that I'm looking for all at once, obviously. But I think to hit on this theme that we're talking about earlier about the fit and sort of the comfort level, that you're applying to a site that you can picture yourself actually fitting in at and working well at. And I'm picturing this applicant when I'm reading their application to see, does this feel like someone that fits here versus am I getting the vibe that this person isn't actually into gero neuropsychology, but they're applying for the gero neuropsychology track just as another thing on their list? Did they just get interested in this specialty? Does their cover letter not really mention gero or neuro that much? So again, I'm looking for the fit. Maybe I'm looking at everything, but fit is going to be one of those big things. I like to see that someone took the time to look into our internship. So in the cover letter, I'm looking at indications that they didn't just copy paste things, and not big errors. I think even more than obsessing how perfect your essays and other things are, I think avoiding errors, because there's always so many just proofreading errors, but also things where they say like, oh, I'm really excited to come to Central Regional Hospital, to conduct research. And I'm going, this is a very clinical internship. There's barely any research offered here. I don't know what you're talking about here. Or they're talking about some certain disorders that we don't see much of. And I'm going, that would make you a bad fit, especially when you're really playing up that you really want to get X type of experience that we don't offer much. So, again, conveying the idea that you know where you're applying to, that you actually believe that you're a good fit, and you're conveying why you are. The rest of the application itself is the main bulk of the application is a bunch of numbers, right? Your hours and descriptions. That's just, I'm looking in there for a good amount of hours. For my internship, a good amount of assessment tools given, assessment reports written, gero hours. But these are things that you can't really change right now as an internship applicant. So I think you just take a look over what the reader's going to see. They're going to see this many hours, this kind of thing. But the part where you can put yourself is the actual essays and the cover letters. And that's the ones where you want to actually make yourself seem like a good fit. So that's what I look for. I look in the CV for relevant experience, any other hints beyond what was mentioned in the hours, because sometimes someone has like 1 million hours that didn't count in the APIC hours, but that they were doing for master's things or for other types of job experience that's going to be relevant. I'm looking for, since mine is very specific, I'm looking for a dedication to that specialty is a big thing too, which again is the fit. So I want to see, oh, you've joined neuropsychological associations, and you've been doing neuropsych for more than just this last couple semesters. That I know you've been really interested in this, and this really is a good match for you. You talk about neuropsychology in your essays even, and your director, your DCT said that you're really into neuropsych and gotten good feedback from neuropsych people. I'm going to look at letters of recommendation and see if those are from people that can talk about your neuropsych experience. So again, this overall feeling that you know what you're doing and you're actually really into it, and this isn't just some going through the motions type of application.
Wow, it's great to hear really insight from an actual supervisor on the applicants. So for those of us who are currently in internship or searching in the panel, Amy, is your audio?
I think so. Does that sound okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And just to be clear, I finished my internship and graduated. I'm Dr. Amy Griffin, and I'm doing my postdoctoral residency now.
Okay.
So these are memories I'm having to reflect on that I've probably tried to already block out. But yeah.
Well, if we can go back once again for just today. So when you were starting out, who did you seek for guidance around, making your CV, cover letters, essays, and et cetera?
Well, for me, I took longer to finish my program because I had a baby. And so I really got to benefit from people who were in my original cohort going through a year or two ahead of me. So I tried to talk to people who were like where I'm at the postdoc level, or recently graduated or were in internship who I could learn from and kind of get all the dirt on which sites they really liked, who's actually being overworked or who's being underworked and really what the vibes were of each place. So I looked to my peers, and also I used every resource possible at my school, which included the writing center to help with essays and my CV. And then they have a mentoring program that was really helpful. You get assigned a point person who helps you work on your list. And we also had mock interviews, which I thought were embarrassing, but ultimately incredibly helpful. So I just tried to use everything I could through my school and through my friendships.
Right, great resources really around you. How about you, Julie?
Yeah, so I'm a pretty anxious person, so I believe I exhausted all my resources to read my CV, my cover letters, and essays. But my school actually pairs you up with an alumni to help you with the internship process and mock interviews as well. So I had my student mentor help me throughout that process. And in addition, I had my mentors, my past and current supervisors and colleagues read my cover letters and essays, and Jasmine included as well, helping me with the process. And I don't want anyone to, of course, feel overwhelmed. And I think it's just up to you on how many people you want to read your papers, because I personally do not think that there is going to be a perfect CV or cover letter or essay, because the next person who reads it will always continue to have edits because they are another different set of eyes. But I think it's important that if you are applying to a college site or a hospital site, to have someone who has a similar background to read your papers so they can help guide you on what to emphasize throughout the application process.
Okay. And do you have can you add a little more, Jasmine, based on your experience?
Yeah. I kind of mentioned before about this workshop I had, and it kind of allowed me to we just, had a couple students to a professor. And so kind of really leaned on that professor with edits, with getting guidance on, how to make my list and whatnot. And to be honest with you, I didn't have a lot of people I knew who had already gone through the process. So I felt pretty felt pretty alone with it. So it was very stressful in that sense to not really know what comes next and what things look like from that perspective, since a lot of my peers were either applying with me or applying the next year. So I did lean on my professor. I leaned on my DCT and just our clinical training program and being able to really know when to what do. I know Julie mentioned that that's a huge piece of the entire puzzle, is being able to know your dates and when you need to have certain things in, being able to manage hours. So that's where my whole, creating a plan, being able to schedule things and making my own deadlines and whatnot played a big, huge role in it. And having some close family members and peers read my essays and my cover letters and kind of just going in with that. So I did feel a little less support that I wish I had. So, which is why I'm really thankful we have this platform for those who do need that support and do want to reach out. It's really helpful. And when you get into that process, so do lean on those who you can for it.
Great. Yeah, having a platform like this, I think it's definitely a great thing to have in your, not just your toolbox, but just throughout your career, I think. And this part, I think it's a very critical part of getting the internship, is someone to really vouch for you, to really speak for you. And I want to ask Dr. Harris, how would you recommend students to go about selecting people to write your letters of recommendations?
Sure. I found this probably one of the easiest parts of the application process, because there's only so many people that would be even a decent candidate, unless you're, maybe I'm a slacker, but I don't know how many supervisors you've worked with, your millions of supervisors, but usually you've got a few that you're closest with. I go about 50-50 for how much good stuff can you say about me, and how much relevant to the types of sites I'm going to be applying for. Again, as a reader, I'm looking for not only are these letters for this applicant glowing and good and not just in the generic, obviously copy-pasted, it's always overly positive, but that you can get some actual genuine positivity in there and personal relationship, but also is this a person who has worked with them in neuropsychological settings and still likes them? Because that's what I'm going to try to do with this person. Versus just, oh, it's my one person that I TA'd a class with once. That can be good, but that's not always that strong a relationship or that relevant to what they're going to be doing on internship. So I kind of go 50-50 for how genuinely positive and capable can they make this person sound and easy to work with? Because again, I'm going to picture myself working with this person. And the other half being, is it relevant to painting this picture that this is a person genuinely interested in neuropsychology, for example, or psychoanalysis, or whatever your site is interested in. So I kind of weigh those equally. Usually you're going to have maybe 4 or 5 candidates, and then just have to narrow it down to a couple of those. And again, the tiebreaker for me is going to go, there's no tiebreaker. It's kind of the 50-50. So I just kind of have to weigh. I want to make sure I have at least a couple good neuropsych ones, and then maybe one that's a little less neuropsyche, and how much good they can say. And you can ask a writer that too. It's okay to say, hey, I'm looking for someone who could write a letter emphasizing these kinds of things. I think we've worked well together. You would write what you want, but if you would be able to say some positive things about work to me. So you're just kind of hinting and speaking in code to say, you're going to write me a good letter, right? And I've had students ask me that, and I say, here's what I can say about you. And they go, okay, good. I do want you to write me a letter. And I go, okay, good. And so you don't end up with waiting for a letter and it turns out it's funky. So you're allowed to do that. That's not cheating.
Okay. Great tips. I want to ask a question from one of our attendees posted on the chat, and this is open for all the panel members here. If you can answer it, Heidi asked, "Is it a setback to have your degree from Europe, specifically from Denmark, or would you have to specify certain things if applying for internships in the US?" It's very
I was giving you guys space to jump in if anyone wants to, but
I'm not sure about that.
Same here. I haven't had any Danish applicants that I've come across, but I think it would probably come down to your DCT letter would be really key, because they're going to be able to say something about how, hopefully assure me that their training is equivalent to what we'd have here as their director of training, that they've gotten these certain types of experiences, and here is the precedent for it, previous students being accepted to APA internships and doing well, or something like that. So I don't know that's an automatic setback, but it would raise a question mark for me and go, oh, Denmark, I'm not familiar with their training programs. Hopefully I can find something from your DCT or elsewhere that convinces me or just allays any concern that it's any different. So that'd be my guess.
Okay. Well, this is a very unique question. So if we'll, at some point, I think you might meet someone who might have similar experience or in situations. So join us for future sessions, and you might connect with someone who can answer that. So thanks for the question, Heidi. Okay, so I want to ask Amy, what was your internship or your postdoc interview experience? What was that like? And what were some common questions that the sites asked you, if you can remember?
Sure. No, I absolutely can remember. I went on 12 interviews. So I went on a lot of different interviews, and they were all very different. And I felt like that was very helpful because it gave you an idea of what it would actually be like to work at that site. And I really kept in mind that this is a year of my life. And it's a year of me, wanting to work really hard and feel like I'm gaining a lot of skills too. I think my interview experiences were also a little unique because I was a breastfeeding mother. So it was very helpful for me to see from the beginning how open and supportive sites were that had, all day interviews. Some sites had, a space for me to be able to do that privately. We're very supportive. And that ultimately ended up being where I was matched at California Pacific Medical Center. They were extremely supportive. And I felt that I'd be supported as a parent. And I think before my interviews, I'd heard a kind of like a lot of anxious old school ideas, like they don't want to have mothers, they don't want to have parents at internships. They want someone who's just going to work really hard and not have other responsibilities. And as someone who works with mothers and children, that certainly wouldn't vibe with the values of an organization that I would be a good match at. So I think that in those experiences, again, each one was different. A lot of the common questions were around, why this site? What have you learned that you would apply here? And then definitely, what are you hoping to learn at this site that would be building on what you already have? So I ended up being at a site that I felt like I had my worst interview at, of course, right? Like I felt like I was like a nervous wreck. I hadn't left my house in 6 months with a little baby. I was like sweaty, like it was such a mess. But I was relaxed because I was just so nervous in some ways, right? You get so nervous that you're like, oh, whatever, let me just be. And then that ended up being where I matched. So also I feel like just be open to the experiences and connections. I met some really great people in the interviews. You start seeing what a small world it is of people who are working in child psychology. So we were at the same group interviews together. So I would definitely say those were the most common questions and pretty funny highlights of my interview experiences. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Amy. And Jasmine, can you add a little more of your experience to this?
Yeah, definitely. So for me, I personally felt like that was one of the more funner parts of the whole experience because it was just, you get to just be you and go in and kind of present yourself, present your personality. It's not me writing down things. I'm not a big writer. I like to just talk about things in general. So I really enjoyed that part. And I mean, obviously there's definitely levels of nervousness that come in play. So I'm not going to like disregard that piece, but I find that like Dr. Griffin mentioned, there's like a different level, like different types of experience when you're going to each interview, whether it's like a group interview, which I found very interesting and kind of like also a little nerve wracking because you never know when you have, like when you're asked a question in a group interview, when is your turn? When is an appropriate time to talk? So that always gets a little tricky. And then when it's just your individual ones, you're really getting, that experience of getting to know not only them getting to know you, you getting to know them, and kind of like being able to talk about things that you wouldn't be able to talk about in your cover letter or your CV. So that's what I found that that's like a really big piece of the entire kind of process. And questions, like I feel like for the generally the questions remain the same for the most part. I mean, depending on the site you're at. But that was, I was able to kind of hone in on, okay, what are the specific questions I'll ask? And there's a lot of different resources to kind of check out for those questions. And then with that, I kind of wrote out for each question what I would answer. And since I'm applying to similar sites, it kind of worked well. So it wasn't like a lot of work to have to write for each site, but having my general understanding of like what my interests are, what my goals are, what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, what are, the common question, what's the conflict you have with the supervisor, being able to address that. Other questions of, crisis, risk assessment, how would you approach that? So, I mean, generally there are these questions. And so going before interviewing process, having an understanding of how I'm going to answer these questions and having that, it helps build that confidence so you're not just kind of thrown off. But I do highly suggest just be yourself, let yourself kind of show in those interviews, and I'm sure you will find that fit and they will find that fit, and hopefully that will work out in the very end.
Right. Great. Thank you, Jasmine. So I wanted to throw out this last question, maybe to Julie. Is there anything else you would have wanted to know prior to, just in your process of maybe searching for internship later on, or is there any suggestions you can give to students who are embarking on this journey at this stage? What would you give as your advice as a student?
Yeah, I think similar to what Dr. Harris and Dr. Griffin and Jasmine has been saying, definitely start early if you can. 1 or 2 months will do. And definitely put some effort into your essays and your CV, and don't be afraid to ask your supervisors and your mentors to go over the application process with you. And definitely identify your goals and what your priorities are for an internship site. That could be based on theoretical orientation, that could be the population, that could be the location. Definitely ask yourself what your goals and priorities are, and definitely utilize your resources. So it's in terms of your colleagues and peers and other supervisors as well. I think that has been the most helpful advice I've been given. And just don't be discouraged to apply to a site that you think that you may not have too much experience in, because you never know that you could be offered an interview there, and just showing your strengths and showing your passion into working at these various populations as well.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
And lastly, saving as well.
Build around what Julie said about making sure like you have a cheer squad, because it is such a discouraging, like at times like horrible process, to be honest. So people who are like, you're going to get through this, you're going to get through this, and you're going to end up at the place that's going to serve you the best. And every internship has pros, every internship has cons. I did not get interviews at what I thought was my top choice, and then ended up having a totally different experience that helped me pivot my career into hospital work. And I'm so grateful for that. But at that time, it was really hard, and I was grateful for my support network around that.
Awesome. Great. Well, I think as a student myself, I learned so much listening to the panels, and definitely need to do some soul searching and really just process all the information that you shared with us today. So we want to thank all our panels, Dr. Matt Harris, Amy, Jasmine, and Julie. And as we, after this, there will be a yoga movement session with Jenny Cleese. So I hope you can join us for a fun time of, just getting that movement, get your body going, and practicing just overall wellness. So, I'm just really thankful for this time and opportunity, and I hope everyone can just really stay safe and well out there, and just and good luck on this journey. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for moderating.